Good morning. If you look at the notes that I've printed out for you on 1.1, you'll see a section all the way in the back called Frequently Asked Questions. These are the type of questions that I'll ask in class. They're not necessarily the textbook definitions, but they are the gist of the terms that we learn in this section. They're pivotal to the rest of geometry. So we're going to begin. What are the three undefined terms in geometry? If you remember, they are point, line, and plane. That is because these terms, we all agree what they mean, but how do you define a line? When you define a line, you use the word line in the definition, okay? So that's what makes it undefined. The second, which type of line extends infinitely in both directions without end? That would be just a regular line. Remember that a regular line will have arrows in both directions, possibly a couple points on the number line, and we'll talk about how to name it just in a few minutes. The third, which type of line has two endpoints? So this means it has a beginning, and I'll draw it, a beginning. Sorry, it's 6 a.m. A beginning, and then it has an end. So two endpoints would make it a line segment. Okay, segment, just like you see on TV. If you watched a segment of the news, that means you watched the beginning and the end of the, sorry, I said that wrong. So like a segment on, listen at 11 o'clock today to see what's polluting our lake and filling your children's brains with blah, blah. That is a segment. It has a beginning, it has an end, it has a purpose. So that's how you can remember a line segment. The fourth, which type of line has one endpoint and extends infinitely in the other direction? So it could look like this, could look like this, could look like this. Many, many things. This would be called a ray. And we're going to talk about, again, how to name all of those. The last, what's the difference between collinear and coplanar? Well, remember that collinear has that root word of linear, which means line. So these are points that are on the same line. In coplanar, you can see plane. There's no E there, but you get the gist. They're points on the same plane. We're going to skip this in the recording because I did these in class. We just graded classwork. Now we're going to go over how to name all 5 parts. Know that you can pause this whenever you need. So whenever you name a point, let's say we wanted to name point A. All you write is a capital A. If we wanted to name letter B, all you write is a capital B. And again, you guessed it, all you do to name point C is to give a capital C. Alright, I divided them by commas just because you don't want to write A, B, C if you're talking about individual points. A line. There are so many ways to name a line. You can use the word line, or you can use the symbol, but if you use the symbol, you have to use 2 points on that line. Points. If you use the word line, you get 1 letter, and it's the lowercase letter. Alright, so if you look at our picture, the only lowercase letter that I see would be this M. So this would be called line M. When we're naming it the other way with the symbol, we can use any 2 points that are on the line. Now know that M is not a point on the line. It does not have a dot. It is not attached to the line. But you know what are the letters W, X, and Y. So whenever you're naming a line, you just need 2 letters. So you could say WY, You could even say WX. Remember that these arrows that are in the name, I'll highlight them, those arrows, those mean it extends infinitely in both directions. So just because I name W and X does not mean that I'm not calling the whole line. Because of those arrows, it includes every other part of the line. So something also to know is that you can reverse the letters. So you could say XW. You could say YX. You could say XY. Different things like that. So as long as there are 2 points and then that symbol above. To name a plane. When you name a plane, there's one thing you absolutely have to do. You always write the word plane. So when we're naming it, we can name it with the word plane and 3 points, or we say plane and then there's going to be an italics capital letter, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So whenever you're naming a plane, normally you'll see them use 3 points. So you can use E-L-A, you could say L-A-N, but you can only use any combination of these 4 letters. S is not on the plane, so how can you name the plane with the letter S when it's not on the plane? And then this letter P is not a point. It does not have a dot. That's really the main reason. And it's in italics. So that would be our second option, plane P. And we get that from this P in the corner. There's one last thing I would like to just point out when naming a plane. I'm going to draw on this. You can't draw on yours, but I'm the teacher, and I just need to show you an example. Let's say we had QR, oh, that's an O, QRT, we already have an S. You could not name it plain QRT. You can't name it any variation of plain QRT. You can't say plain TRQ. You can't say plain RQT. Reason being is they're collinear. So whenever you're naming a plane, you cannot use collinear points. You could say plane QR, like we could use L, plane RTA, plane NTR, but you cannot use just the 3 collinear points. A segment. So before we get into a segment, I just want to point out something. When you name a point, you use 1 letter. When you name a line, you use 2 letters. When you name a plane, you use 3 letters. Now there are those exceptions of when you say line M or when we said plane P. But if you don't see those, and most often you won't, you would use 2 letters to name a line and 3 letters to name a plane. Well, a segment falls under the category of a line, and there's only one way to name a segment. The segment starts at A, so it starts at A, and it ends at B. So we would name it AB with a straight line above it. No dots. The way I draw it makes it look like a dot, but you don't have dots, you just draw a straight line. You can also name the reverse, which would be BA. Just like in a line we could name WY, and we could also name YW. If I wanted on my line segment to name only half of the line, so from A to M, you would say AM, or you could say MA, and the same thing with the other half of the line, MB or BM. The last is a ray. So rays are very particular. Again, they fall under the category of a type of line. You use 2 letters and this symbol. this symbol will always point to the right. And the first letter will be an end point. We call them an end point, a starting point, and I'll show you what I mean. So in the first one, the end point would be H, and it goes off infinitely towards the direction of G. So HG. And then the second, so we draw our arrow. My end point is A, and it goes infinitely in the direction of B. So remember that you cannot flip these around. So to name the purple, I can't just say, oh, it's the same thing. Let me give it some room. Oh, it's the same thing as GH, because GH, ray GH, would look like this. G first and H second, which is not what we have. We have H first and G second. So this name would not work for us. The only name for that ray is HG. The last thing we learned were collinear points, opposite rays. So sorry, it's so early. Opposite rays, they're collinear. Remember, collinear means they're on the same line. So on the same line would be points like this and not points like this. So this one is collinear, whereas this one is not collinear. Just to remind you. They would share an endpoint, and then obviously they go in opposite directions because they're called opposite rays. So looking at our picture, CH, let's look at it. It could not be an opposite ray because there would have to be a ray where I've drawn, and there is not. So we'd move on. CG, there is a ray there. There is an opposite ray. So CG, they're collinear, so I'm talking G, C, and D, they're collinear. They share the same endpoint of C. So CG is an opposite ray of CD. And then the last to check out would be CB, but again, you would need a ray the direct opposite direction. So these are the only opposite rays. Going to review really quick. Use the diagram in example 1. Give two other names for line ST. So we have, I outlined it in green. So we can use the word line and that small italic letter. If you can find it, it is the M, as in Marshall. So M. Some people take the obvious and you can switch the letters, so TS. You could also say PT or TP. You could also say SP or PS. And then the second half of the question, name a point that is not coplanar with Q, S, and T. Q, S, and T. This would be point V. Next part, number 2, give another name for KL. This is a line segment. Line segments, you can rename switching the letters. Are KP and PK the same ray? So KP, let's see. I'm going to outline that in red. KP and PK. So if you look, they don't cover the same amount of area. KP starts at K and goes infinitely toward the direction of P, whereas PK starts at P and goes infinitely in the direction towards K. So that one would not work. So we'd say no. And then the second portion, are NP and NM the same? So NP starts at N, goes towards P, infinitely in that direction. NM starts at N and goes infinitely towards the direction of M. So at first look, they don't look like they are the same ray, but they actually are. Because of this arrow, Remember, the arrow means it extends infinitely in that direction. So that means NP will eventually include M and beyond. So yes, and what I've just explained. The last thing we'll do together is name two different planes on this juice box containing QP. So we have QP. You want to see which rectangle QP is the side of. And if you look at the side of the front part of the juice box, when we're naming a plane, we always first write the word plane, and then we use 3 points on the box. So you could say QPM, you could say PQN, NQP, QNM, NMP, PMN, anything like that. And then the second part that it is included in is the bottom of the box. So we could say plane RQP, you could say PQR, QPS, PSR, RSP, any combination of those 3 letters. Thank you for listening. I hope you have learned. Have a good day.